You're listening to Travel Nursing and Allied Life, hosted by TravCon.
Hey Nomads, welcome to another episode of Travel Nursing and Allied Life. I am Dylan Callier, and we are getting very, very close to that 3-month sprint right before TravCon, which is in September between the 18th and the 21st. And I wanted to take some time to explain for those that might be new to travel, for those that might have never asked off time in a contract, on how to do this so that you can get the time off in order to enjoy the conference. Now, a lot of people show up that weekend before, so a lot of people are going to be showing up that Saturday. They kind of stay and they fly back until that Wednesday. So it's a good chunk of time to ask off for a contract. For those that are new to travel, you might not even realize that you can request dates off. It's definitely not a deal breaker, but there is some finesse that goes into it. To one, make sure that you still get the position, and two, that your employer or the facility that you're going to be working for is agreeable to that, and they're not going to tell you no, and then you have to choose between a rock and a hard place. So this is usually something that is done at the beginning of the contract before you sign. If you go through the interview process, a lot of times you're either talking to an HR person or maybe a clinical person, but usually they're not the individual that actually signs off on the contract. So oftentimes, if I'm going into a contract, I know the dates that I need off, and I let my recruiter know that up front. And that is pretty much on their end to communicate. If you're going through the interview, don't really have to bring it up because it's going to be in the contract when they send it over, and then that individual is going to sign. I wouldn't bring it up in an interview just in case that HR person doesn't really understand contracting, or if that clinical director might say, oh, we have another candidate that's not asking for 5 days off, let's go with them. I would present yourself as the best candidate. You get the offer, and then when they submit that contract, you ask for those days off. Usually, if you have 3 days off, 5 days off, they're not even going to bat an eye. Sure, you can take those days off. Once you get into maybe taking a full week off, up to a full 2 weeks off, you might experience some pushback on that, and they might not accept. Oftentimes, when I'm working with my recruiter on asking for time off, for example, this contract that I'm currently on, I asked off a full 2 weeks during a 13-week contract. That's a pretty big chunk of time off when you're talking about being there for 3 months. And I'm just having family coming in. It's their first time out to the West Coast. I want to make sure I have that time off to enjoy this trip with them. And so I'm asking for full 2 weeks off. And I let the recruiter know, hey, these are my dates that I need off. I include the weekends. If you're a therapist, don't forget that, because sometimes they'll try and work you into those weekends. So make sure you have the full dates off that you need. And then tell them if there's any friction, if there's any pushback, I am more than happy to extend 1-2 weeks in order to make up for that time off. Oftentimes, if it's less than a week, there's no friction, there's no pushback. Once you get up into more about 2 weeks, they might be considering some other candidates. And so if you say, hey, I'll stick around for an extra couple weeks just to make up for that, they're like, boom, perfect, and they'll sign, no problems. I personally haven't asked off for more than 2 weeks. I would say if you're planning a trip, maybe extend your current contract to meet until that time off that you need. If it's going to be more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe you're doing a 6-week trip out of the country. Maybe you're just doing your 30 days at home. Make sure I would probably put that between contract. Or if you're currently working for a place and you want to extend, you can let them know, hey, I do have to go back home for 30 days to maintain my tax home, my tax residence, my permanent residence. And they'll be like, okay, cool. And they'll let you take that month off, come back for another 3 weeks. So that is usually how it goes for asking time off. Again, this is something that happens before the contract is signed. You can absolutely work it in there once you show up for the facility. It's just not an absolute guarantee. So for example, I asked for some time off for a certain contract. The recruiter forgot to put that into the contract. They already sent it. They went through this back and forth. They asked me to reach out to the director and get that approval. And I emailed them and they said, yeah, that's fine. And so it can go some other ways as well. Most preferred at the beginning when you still have some leverage, in quotations, when you're an ideal candidate, they're the one they want. They have already agreed to saying yes, and you're like, hey, I want to come, but I do need these days off. You have a little bit more control of that situation than when you arrive and you're like, hey, my recruiter made a mistake, it wasn't included. Can you please can I please request these days off? And so that's usually how it goes. Again, anything less than a week, probably not going to get any pushback. Up to 2 weeks, that's when you want to say, hey, I'm willing to extend 1 to 2 weeks in order to make up for that, if there's pushback. And then if it's more than 2 weeks, I would really think about having that as some time off between contracts. If you're on a current contract and you have 4 weeks off, you have to go back home, whatever it might be, and you still have a month of playroom, you can usually extend for that full month until you have to go back home. So most facilities are happy to keep you around, and that is the finesse of how to ask off for any time off during a contract, but specifically for TravCon. So as you are coming up with signing contracts, keep the dates in mind. September 18th to the 21st this year, 2022 for TravCon. And I would also request for that weekend off. Most people get there early. Some people get there as early as Friday night. And make sure that you are there for the epic dance party at Dre's. Tuesday night, don't leave out early for that, or you might have some FOMO or fear of missing out. But all right, guys. Everybody have safe travels. Everybody have a great contract, and we will see you this year at TravCon, September 18th through 21st, 2022.
Thanks for listening to Travel Nursing and Allied Life. You can find the full show notes below or at travcon.org. Please help us out by rating our podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.